Welcome to the show. I'm your host, John Knocklinger. I'm a men's divorce coach and a New Jersey divorce attorney. Today, we're going to discuss narcissism, domestic violence, and how to co-parent with someone that subjected you to these horrible issues. My fabulous guest today is Stephany Ann. She's an attorney, international best-selling author, and the recipient of the Governor's Award for Advocacy with Survivors of Domestic Violence. After two difficult marriages that we're going to hear a lot about today, she has harnessed the power of the emotional freedom technique, which also we're going to learn about today. I actually don't even know anything about it, so I'm very excited to learn. And now guides others on their path to healing and professional growth. You can reach her on Facebook and LinkedIn. Her links will be in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here, Stephany.
Thank you so much for having me on your show today, John.
It is my pleasure. So as you know, this podcast is for men going through divorce. And even though in our conversation today, you're going to be talking about a husband that you had struggles with, really, there's plenty of men who also have struggles with their spouse, their wives that also have these issues. So it's really going to be a good conversation for everybody, regardless of your gender. So I think the good place to start is to really take people back in your life and kind of learn about your history so we can see how you got to where you are today. So we know you're married twice. So let me take you back to your first marriage. Can you tell us a little bit about, how old were you guys when you got married? Were you together beforehand for very long? Do you have any children? Just take us back to the first marriage and give us a little glimpse into what you were going through.
Sure. So, when I met my first husband, we grew up in the same town. We were from this small town. I was in university in Oregon, and he was in university in California. Both of our parents lived in the same town still. In fact, his dad was a psychiatrist and my mom was a psych nurse, and they worked together for many, many years. And so it was kind of this match made in heaven. And I had just got back from spending almost 5 years backpacking around the world. And I was back in my hometown waiting to go back to university. And he had to come up and he had braces on for the second time. So he was coming up a lot and visiting his parents. So we reconnected and everything was great. He, was wonderful. He was kind. He was charming. He really went above and beyond to kind of put me up on this pedestal. But he was also really my first real relationship. And I was in my 20s, my mid-20s at the time. So we dated for about 2 years and then we got married. When we got married, I was 27 and he was 26. And again, everything seemed really good. It was when I went off to law school when his behavior changed. And
Really?
So if you look at like what a narcissist is, one of the criteria for being diagnosed as a narcissist is this excessive need for admiration and adoration. They want all your attention. They want you to fawn all over them. And when you don't, then they will go seek that elsewhere. So it was in law school when all my focus now was on law school. You remember, like first year of law school, how it was just, it was a lot. And he even told me within the first couple of weeks, he's like, I don't want to hear about law school anymore. I'm tired of you talking to me about law school. I don't want to hang out with your law school friends. I don't even want to be involved in this. So he kind of shut me off at that part of my life. But, I worked so hard, and you know how hard it is to get into law school and to be successful at law school. It becomes all consuming, and it does become your life. And so he shut that door on this part of my life. And then he started seeking admiration and adoration and affection from other women. And I did not know about this till several years later.
How many years later was it you found out about all that?
It was about 3 years. It was my last year in law school, 2 years, 2.5 years.
So how many years had you been married when you went to law school?
We we had been married 2 years. So we dated for like 2.5 years. Then we were married for 2 years. We didn't start having children until after law school.
Okay. So
Yeah,
how long were you married in total?
14 years.
Okay, so you stayed married to him for quite some time after you found out about his extracurricular activities.
I did. And it was one of those things when I found out about it, we were in the middle of building a house. I was on my way to the State Department and all of this stuff. And he kind of gave me this ultimatum like, Stephany, you either need to end your career right now and start having kids. It's been like, 6, 7, 8 years. And he wanted to start a family, but I was still so very career focused and driven at that time. But I gave everything up for him. And it's like when you ask people who have been in these like psychological and emotionally abusive relationships, like, well, why did you do that? I had an out. Why did I stay? Why did I give up everything I worked so hard at for a husband who disrespected me, didn't value me, didn't appreciate me, all these things. And it's like, I didn't know. And for a long time, I didn't know why I did all that. It wasn't until later on when I learned about the trauma bond, when I learned about the cycle of narcissistic abuse and what that was, then I was able to make sense of some of the things I did.
When did you start, during this 14 years, when did it start to dawn on you that he was subjecting you to abuse?
To be very honest, I didn't, through the whole marriage, I didn't really think that. Because how many of us do this? We put cheating on one side and abuse on the other side. And even though my background's in domestic violence, 20 years ago when I was involved in working at the prosecutor's office and with domestic violence, we were only focused on physical violence. We weren't focused on emotional and psychological abuse. And so, one, I didn't see myself as a victim or being abused. And two, I just looked at him as a cheater. Well, he's just a cheater. He is, I didn't trust him anymore, but I didn't know how to get out. And when your families are close and then you have children and you have all these ties together, it's hard to unravel all of that and to get out.
Yeah, sure. Well, so how many times did he cheat on you? Was this just a one-time thing, or was this an ongoing thing throughout the course of your marriage?
It was ongoing. And so it wasn't, for him, it was more emotional affairs. So again, just looking for that connection with other women, looking for that admiration and adoration. He constantly needed that. And so he would just chat all night with women. And I would confront him and tell him, this is how it's making me feel. But again, why did I stay? I don't even know. I mean, I know now, but at the time, it was just, you keep trying to change all these things about you. Well, maybe if I do this, okay, well, maybe if I'm home more, maybe if I do this or that. And so we start becoming all these things, hoping that one of these things that we are trying to become will be the one that will get them to stop doing what they are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that a lot of people go through that where they look at themselves in the mirror and they're like, it's my problem. I'm the one that has to fix this marriage, when, really it's the other person. I mean, he put this ultimatum on you about having children. Did you end up having children with him?
We did. We have 2 little boys, Jackson and Jonah. They are now 12 and 9.
Mm-hmm.
And, then they became my world. And so, you hear people like, well, you kind of just turn into roommates living under the same roof. And now you stay because you're trying to change and try to figure out who you need to become to make this marriage work. But then you focus all your attention on the children and raising the children and giving them a good life.
Were they aware that anything was going on between you and your ex-husband?
They were so little. Like when we actually did separate, and he left for another married woman, and my youngest was 2, my oldest was 4, so they were still young. But then he spent 6 years using legal against me and filing all these motions, doing all this stuff constantly in court. And it was during that time I started talking to my kids about his behavior and what he's doing.
So your separation occurred because he decided to leave the marriage for somebody else. Is that right?
Yep.
All right. So
Yeah,
he sort of forced the issue, which I guess since you weren't consciously aware of the abuse he was putting you through, it's sort of almost like he did you a favor by ending the marriage, or at least that's.
But we say that all in hindsight, like, okay, he did what I couldn't have done. But when you're in it at the time, we would call this the discard stage of the relationship, where you are discarded. And so it doesn't feel at the time that he's doing you a favor, because it's like, oh, it's devastating and your world falls apart, and everything that, although it was fake, it was everything you worked really hard for, and everything that you were trying to become, and losing yourself and all of that. But now losing all your future that you had planned, and your future that you had planned for your children. And it just became, it wasn't what I wanted. But
Yeah.
looking back, was the best thing for me.
Oh, absolutely. Well, you've had a lot of time to get perspective on everything. So of course, looking back at it, it's always a lot easier than when you're in the middle of it. I mean, divorce is hard no matter what. It doesn't matter what the circumstances are. It's hard on everybody. But I'm kind of interested in your children. So they're currently 12 and 9, right?
Yep. Yes.
So how old were they when he decided to end the marriage?
Jonah was 2 and Jack was 4.
So what do they remember from their father leaving for somebody else?
They don't really remember a whole lot. Jackson remembers more because he was a little older, and actually he became he really struggled with it, because when my first husband Josh, when he left, he didn't see them for a couple months. Like, he was in with his new supply. They were just off in their own delusional world together. And so the kids didn't see him. He wasn't around. And so it was just me. I got them into play therapy. We all went to play therapy for several years, working through all of that, figuring out what dad's doing and where dad is. And here we are.
Yeah. Well, so you've already foreshadowed this a little bit, but I'm really curious about what happened after he left. How long did it take for the divorce process to start? Who initiated it? I know he initiated the separation. Just give us a little flavor for what you were going through right then, because it sounds like he really used the legal system in a really aggressive way. So I'm really would love to hear this part of the story.
Yeah, so he actually filed right away, and it took us 4 years to get divorced. And it was just, in where I lived in Oregon at the time, so I don't know how it is in New Jersey, but in Oregon, you're required to go to mediation first. But you cannot, it is almost impossible to mediate anything with a narcissist. They love to go in circles, and they talk in circles, and just, it's like you end up at a point where you're like, you don't even know what you're even talking about. So we went to, he hired one of the very best attorneys in our area, and then we went to mediation. We actually had a retired family law judge come down from another state, because both of our families are pretty well known in the area. And so I hired someone from a different different county, very far away, who did not know our families or us. And so we spent over 9 hours in mediation, and I got exactly what I wanted. And I had my attorney there, and his attorney, he did not have his attorney there. You know, narcissists, again, they're too smart for all of this. But because I actually got everything I wanted in mediation, he fired his attorney, who was one of the top family law attorneys in the area. Fired that attorney, and then he threw us in court. And it was in court that he just kept bringing up. It wasn't like he was bringing up things. It was just, he just refused to negotiate or work with anything. He felt that he didn't owe me a thing. I had the house. We had just built this beautiful house on the river, and I had the house, and I had the kids. I was going for full custody, and yeah, it was just so many motions after motions. He refused to give me his pay stubs. He refused to do anything. So we had to, you know, all our discovery is like, we just had to go, we had to be very forceful with everything, because he just refused to do anything. He was hiding assets. He was hiding money. He was draining different bank accounts, even when he was required not to. And it was taxing. He refused to give any money to the kids. I actually had to get his wages garnished. And here, you know, he was a doctor. And I wasn't working at the time. I was at home with 2 little kids. And so it was very, very stressful going through all of that, and then trying to figure out what just happened after 14 years of being with someone. How, you know, I mean, I knew there was something wrong. It's just, again, it's like, well, he's just a cheater, and sometimes people are just cheaters, and that's just what they do. So it wasn't until later on, when I was able to connect the dots with his behavior and his personality, to actually see that, yeah, he had this disordered personality.
Did that happen while you were going through the legal process, or was it even after that?
It was after that. That was actually after I left my second husband, because there were similarities and differences. And it was like, what is going on here? Like, why am I like attracting these horrible men into my life? Like, what is it about these guys and these situations? Because it was almost like they were mimicking themselves. And so with my second divorce, it was like, I needed to find out what happened to me and what I went through, and come up with a label and a name. And, you know, my first husband, his father is a psychiatrist, and actually during this whole divorce process and stuff, he actually disowned his parents, because his parents refused to not disown me. And so he disowned his parents. He prevented the kids from seeing them when he had them. He was horrible to his parents, but his parents had healthy boundaries. And they're like, here's our boundaries, and we love you. We love Stephany, but we are going to be a part of her life.
No, true narcissistic personality there. So how did your divorce end? Did it end with the settlement at the end, or did you actually have to go through a trial?
So we started the trial, and we were on, I believe, day 3 or day 4 of trial. And we had called his father to testify against his son. And once Josh found out that his father was going to testify against him, he settled.
Interesting. Very interesting. I mean,
and again, we are in our town. We are well-known families, and you know, and he respected his father up until a point, but who wants your father to come and testify against you when they know things about you, that you have this image, this ego that you are trying to uphold? Well,
Stephany, who wants to go through a public trial? Like, I just,
right?
I mean, I don't even understand that. I mean, people don't understand a trial is public. Anyone can walk into the courtroom, or it's supposed to be this way. Anyone can walk into the courtroom and listen. I mean, your case is public. All the stuff that's filed is public, unless it's
Yeah,
specifically confidential for some reason. I mean, it's really crazy that it just took his father coming to trial for him to finally, you know, settle for what probably he settled for years earlier.
absolutely. It was, yeah, it was ridiculous. You know, they want to drain you financially. And if they have the means, they will do whatever they can. They will hire people from all expert witnesses to come and tell you that you are the crazy one, that you shouldn't have the kids, that you shouldn't have all these things. When he settled, I got exactly everything I wanted that I wanted 4 years. 4 years ago. It was just, it was emotional. It was taxing. It was draining. I remember my therapist told me, he's like, Stephany, this is going to be a marathon. And I was a runner. So, it resonated with me. This is going to be a marathon, and you have to take care of yourself during this marathon.
Was this a 4-year marathon just because of all the things he was doing, or what years was this happening? I guess, was this happening during COVID or anything where there was another reason?
No, this wasn't during COVID. Our divorce was actually finalized end of December 2019.
Okay, so there was really no reason for it to last this long, which is crazy.
No, it is just because it's a game for them. It is power and control. If they can control everything, if they can control the narrative, if they can control the court schedule, if they can control all of that, they are controlling you. And they know that it is hurting you deeply, and they don't care.
Yeah.
Because it's control. And, he wanted to move away. And, there's the domicile rule and stuff. And I told him, I'm like, fine. It was because he just couldn't handle being in our community, because it's like, well, everyone knows. And so he wanted to move away, a couple hours away with his girlfriend. And I was like, okay, you either have to have my permission or the judge's permission. I will give you my permission for full custody of the kids. And that was it. He signed them away right away.
Is that funny how that happens?
Right? And for me, that was all I wanted, was to have the full custody of the kids, to have that control over that.
Yeah, we see people use the court system all the time, just the way you're describing. It's used very frequently, and because of the way the courts are set up everywhere, all over the country, it's somewhat easy to do, because the courts don't want to actually do trials. They want everything to settle and be resolved. So because of that, it's easy to get judges to push things off. And then if you have custody disputes, it's, these experts, they're great. There's a lot of great psychologists that do this work all over the country, but there's not many of them out, all over the country, and they take forever. And so, a custody evaluation it can easily take a year, and your children change a lot over the course of that year, which is the other humorous part, is by the time they finish their evaluation, most of it, needs to be redone because circumstances have changed. It's unfortunate you had to go through this. You now, of course, and anyone listening to this, I mean, if you're encountering this kind of issue in the course of a divorce, it's probably because you're dealing with someone who is a narcissist. It's very likely that's what it is, because normal people that don't act like that, they can see the fact that they're not going to fight you and spend $100,000 on legal fees, let's say. It makes no sense. It makes no logical sense to do that unless you're being driven by another purpose. And if that purpose is control, just to work you down until you finally give him what he wants. And half the time, I'm sure he doesn't even know what he wants. It's more about winning, whatever that means for him, than it is getting
Absolutely.
what he wants. So, so you get divorced, and I'm assuming that's not where it ended with him.
No, no, no. So our divorce got finalized, and then it was just so many things. He kept finding emotions for status quo, which like what? So it was just almost every 6 months, 4 or 6 months, there was just some other ridiculous motion he was filing, and for just nonsensical things, just to file, just to show that he has control. And he would make threats like he tried to get custody changed one time, and so it's like, well, it's very challenging to change custody. I mean, you have to show that there's been a huge change in circumstance that would give them custody. And so, but it's like he didn't want custody. The time he even had with the children, he got them 6 overnights a month. He only had them for 3 or 4 of those overnights. He was constantly bringing them back early, constantly calling me, I can't do it today, you have to take them. I'm like, well, of course, what mother or what father who actually loves and wants to be with their children is going to say, no, you keep them? And again, that's control. He controlled my weekends because he was always bringing the kids back. And this went on for another 2 years, and he just kept getting the craziness. I don't want to call it crazy because I feel like that is just dismissing their behavior, like, oh, they're crazy, so that's why they're doing this. No, it was very intentional, everything he did. But he actually committed suicide a couple months ago. And
wow,
it was very, he started to try. So I moved to Florida, and I won that as well because he just could not prove that he was a responsible or even a father that was involved with the kids. He wasn't involved with them. He couldn't name their teachers. I don't even think he knew what grade they were in. But he wanted that, they want that image. Here's my wonderful children. They are so great. They make me look so good. And he was Disneyland dad. He just threw a bunch of money at them and then left them. And so, I moved to Florida, and I won that case because, again, he just couldn't prove that he was even involved with them. But that also took a while. But so they had to spend summers with him. So they were on one of their summers, and he was starting to trying to alienate them from me. He took their cell phones away. And I'm like, why did you take their cell phones away? They only call me on their cell phones. And he's like, well, we've decided not to have cell phones in our family. It's just, they just have, it's just, oh yeah. And so I would tell my kids, I'm like, the truth of your dad's behavior and who he is will come out. And my boys didn't want to spend the summer with them, but they really didn't have a choice. And for me to be very far away from him, which was healthier and safer for me, they had to spend the summers with him. And so my 9-year-old, he would just cry on the phone, Mom. And my older son, he was like, when's the truth coming out, Mom? You said the truth will come out. You said all truth always comes out. And I'm like, Jackson, the truth will come out. We just keep waiting. And then it was like a month later, he committed suicide. And so, it's like he was trying to do all those things and just wreak havoc and chaos. And, a narcissist just brings drama, trauma, and chaos everywhere they go. And then the whole family suffers from it, from their behavior. And so I always talk to my kids in a way that they could understand, this is your dad's behavior. This is what he's doing. This, just keep focused. You'll soon be back with me. And so, it was hard for everyone. And, when he did die, I sat down and I was talking to the boys. A couple hours later, my 9-year-old said, he's like, Mom, we can go travel the world now. It was a 9-year-old. And it was his way of saying, we are free. Because it doesn't end. And they will do that. I mean, they could have, if Josh had his way, he would have done this until the day he died. I mean, if he lived longer, they don't give up.
So we're gonna get to your second marriage in a minute, but going back to this one, now that you've had all this time to understand who this Josh was and what you actually had gone through, take me back and talk to your younger self. What advice would you have given your younger self, back when you got out of law school, or you were in law school, I guess, and you started to see these changes? What would you have? I mean, you got 2 children out of this marriage, so you can't, I'm sure your boys are great. So it's always hard to say, I wish I'd never been married to this man, but it's hard to say that because
right.
But go back. I mean, is there any advice you would have given on, anything you would have done differently within the context of this marriage? Just kind of take us from where you are right now, where you're actively helping people and educating people, and go pretend like you're the person you're educating. What advice would you give yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I will do 2 things. One is trust your intuition. When things are off and they're off for a reason. And that feeling that you are feeling, or that soft, still voice in the beginning that is saying, red flags, something's wrong here, don't settle, don't go with this person. You kind of, you push that voice back. And so really trust your intuition, because when you start getting in these psychologically and emotionally abusive relationships, the voice of the person becomes very loud in your head. And it's really hard to even hear that soft, still, intuitive voice anymore when someone else's voice is so loud. The second one would be, don't settle and don't put yourself second. You come first. Always choose you and choose what is highest and best for you. Not trying to please everyone else and make everyone else happy. And one of the reasons why I stayed so long in that marriage was because my parents had never been divorced and his parents had never been divorced. And so, it's like I grew up in a very healthy family, and he did too. But, he had his other issues. And so I didn't want to disappoint our families. I didn't want to disappoint everyone else in my life. So instead, I disappointed myself.
I think that's great advice. I hope everyone listening, if you're going through this, listen to what Stephany just said. I mean, I can certainly relate. I stayed married 15 years before I decided that I needed to move on. People stay in marriages longer than they should, but we all do it for a reason, for all kinds of different reasons. It's hard to be a Monday morning quarterback and think about what you should have done, during this long marriage, but you don't know what you don't know, I guess, is the way to look at it. And it's hard to look at your marriage from the outside because you're the one living it every day. And then when you have children, it's so difficult because the children obscure everything in a marriage. And then if someone's a narcissist, the children, unfortunately, are like little bombs, and they use them as little bombs the whole time, both to try to get you to stay married to them by making you so scared about what might happen if you're the one that leaves. I'm going to take children from you. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. To what you went through, which is, after you got divorced, continuing to use them because that's the only connection you had, really. If you don't have children, there's no connection, or there shouldn't be a connection.
Mhm.
So it's so difficult. But you decided after all of this, Stephany, to get remarried. So how
Oh, yeah.
so how long after the divorce was done was it that you met your second husband, and when did you get married again?
So, yeah. So it was about 2 years, and I thought I was healed. You know that old adage, well, time heals. Okay, time heals when you have had a healthy relationship that you are dissolving, right? Time will heal them. Time does not heal when you have been in a relationship with a narcissist. And so, and at the time, again, I didn't know. And so I was like, oh, 2 years. Okay, that's long enough. I can date now. I'm healed. I'm good. And so I made a list. You know, how many of us do that? We write out all the characteristics and qualities of a potential someone that we would want to be with. So on my list, I was like, well, I'm tall, dark, handsome, of course, uh, athletic, you know, good looking, a divorced dad, specifically with little boys the same age as my boys. You know, I got pretty specific here. No doctors, no one in the medical field, because in my head I'm like, oh, they're all cheaters. So let's go businessman. I'm not a businessman. So I make this list and I put it out into the universe. And a week later, I meet a man who checks every single thing off the list. And I got very specific and very detailed about things that I was looking for. And so when we first started dating, he was wonderful. Again, he treated me with kindness and respect. He wanted to know all these things about me. And he was a great listener. And how many of us say, oh, it's so hard to find someone who actually takes a genuine interest in you. He wanted to know about my past relationships. He wanted to know details about my past marriage. Um, and you know, he passed the family test. My brother-in-law was a OSP sergeant at the time. My brother-in-law loved him because the thing is, again, narcissists are charismatic. They are charming. They can light up a room. And so if they walk in the room and you see this beautiful, they're beautiful people, and they chose you, doesn't that make you feel good about yourself? And again, remember, I'm coming off of 14 years of someone cheating on me the whole time. I wanted to feel good. I wanted to feel sexy and beautiful and appreciated and respected and valued. And he did all those things in the beginning. And because I had manifested him and met him a week later, when he started mentioning things like, oh, we are soulmates, we are destined to be together, we must have been together in a different lifetime, we we should let's move in, like you know, like the relationship progressed so quickly and so intensely because I thought I had found my person. Here's the person I've been praying for. This is the person I should have been with 20 years ago. And he would say that. Where were you 20 years ago? Oh my God, where were you 20 years ago? Wow, how this is so perfect. This is wonderful. And you know, in hindsight, because you know everything, you can see everything clearly in hindsight, this was the idolization phase when you are with a narcissist. They become that person that you want them to be. He became the person, my person, and he mirrored my values. He mirrored my hobbies. He mirrored everything about me. You fall in love with yourself and you don't know that because it's you feel like you've found your person. And he convinced everyone. My family loved him. And even my Josh's parents, my first ex-husband's parents, they loved him because I was still, they kept me. Remember, he disowned his parents. And so and they loved him. And so how you feel like everything is perfect. And so I thought I had found my person. And then the mask comes off because they can't keep pretending forever. Remember, narcissism is a disordered personality. They take on different personalities as it suits whatever it is they're trying to get, whatever they need. And when the mask comes off, it becomes very confusing because you're like, well, wait a second. Where's the guy I fell in love with in the beginning? Who was kind, who was respectful, who was wonderful, who treated me so well, like a queen. And now who is this person that is manipulative, that is gaslighting, that is critical and mean and aggressive? Like, who's this person? And for me, when all of this happened, this was in 2020. So here's where, it's like, it's the crazy making. The mask came off in 2020, and it was so hard to know what was truly his behavior, or was he just reacting because the world was crazy and the world was mad and everything was just crazy. So, they say when the mask comes off, when you are in these narcissistic abusive relationships, that's where all this cognitive dissonance comes, because you start having the devaluation and love bombing and devaluation and love bombing, and it becomes very confusing. You start to live in this fog of what is truth and what isn't. And so it became very, very confusing. And for anyone who's listening on the show, I know gaslighting is a word that is used all the time, it seems. But gaslighting is when you manipulate another person into doubting their experiences, their perceptions, and their understanding of events. It's a form of emotional abuse. It's coercive control by someone you love. And so it's very confusing. Like, why are they doing this to me? They will intentionally lie and deceive to confuse you. And even they start insulting you and making fun of you and calling you names, but they won't take any responsibility or blame. And that's why they gaslight. It shifts the blame and responsibility away from them, because now they can say, that's not what happened. You're not understanding what happened. And so it becomes very confusing.
Gaslighting seems to be the word du jour these days. Everyone uses it. I actually want to talk to you a little bit about what a narcissist actually is too. And for those of you that are not watching, you're listening to this podcast, that is Stephany's toddler that is decided to come say hello. You can't keep toddlers away, even when mommy's doing something. You cannot keep them away. We know all about that. So, I somewhat jokingly say this all the time, that men routinely come into my attorney office and will tell me that their wives are bipolar, and women will come in and tell me that their husbands are narcissistic. And people throw around these terms, much like gaslighting, and they have no clue what it actually means. So I kind of want to ask you, now that you've been through these 2 marriages and you've given us some background, I kind of would love for you, in your own words, to sort of just tell us what a narcissist, what that means to you, number one. And number two, how do you tell the difference between someone who's really a narcissist and someone who's just, egocentric and not quite to the same level of an abusive narcissist, but somebody that maybe has some of the same traits? Can you give our listeners a little background? And by the way, I know we've been talking about a man in this context that's a narcissist, but women can be narcissists too. This is not a gender-specific disorder. It is, both genders can become narcissists, at the same frequency. But take us back, Stephany, and let our listeners know about some of the things they can look for to differentiate this maybe from other issues.
Yeah. So, one of the things with a narcissist is So there's several characteristic traits, like criteria, that to be formally diagnosed as a narcissist, there's 9 specific traits, and they have to have at least 5 of these traits. So some of the traits are this grandiosity. They are larger than life, and they think that they are larger than life. They have this preoccupation with fantasies of unlimited power, wealth, beauty, whatever it is. They put themselves on this pedestal and think everyone should worship them and everyone wants to be them. If it's a man, it's like, I can get any woman that I want. Very, very arrogant. And you can see the arrogant, or at least, with my first ex-husband, his arrogance came out in court, like so arrogant, above the judges, above the attorneys. This lack of empathy, though, like they are not empathetic at all. They have this excessive sense of entitlement. They are entitled to anything they want. And they have, like I was mentioning earlier with my first ex-husband, this excessive need for adoration and adoration. And they want all of you. They are takers. So in these relationships, they take and take and take, and they never give back. And so when you're in a healthy relationship, the taking and giving is, there's reciprocity there. Like, okay, I'm giving more today, but then, tomorrow you're probably going to be filling my cup. In my family with my kids, we say we have this love cup. And if my kids start acting up, or if they feel like they need to have special time with me, or just to really connect with me, they'll say, Mom, my love cup is empty. You need to fill it. Well, when you are in a relationship with a narcissist, a true narcissist, they will never fill your love cup. Whatever you got in that idealization phase in the beginning, that's your cup. And they will slowly drain it over time, and they will never refill it. And so these relationships are exhausting. They are overwhelming. They are a burden. And again, I'm sure listeners are like, "Oh, why don't you just leave?" Mm-hmm. Yeah. I get it. And that's more of the trauma bond of why we stay. It's very challenging to leave these relationships, even though you are exhausted. You feel empty. You have nothing else to give. It's like when your car is on empty, and that the gas light comes on, and you're running on fumes, just praying to get to the gas station. That's how it is. You are giving out of fumes now, and until you have nothing left to give, and they still want more. And if you won't give it to them, they will go get it from somewhere else. And so you just muster all the fumes you have to continue to pour into this relationship. They want to be respected, for whatever reason it is. The respect is huge with them. And so, I heard someone explain one time, like, narcissism is, as a whole, it is like a cake. And so if you were to take some of the ingredients out of a cake, it would no longer be a cake. It would be something completely different. Because some people say, well, what about like healthy narcissism? Or what about my partner has some of these criteria. He must be a narcissist. Well, if you look at, they must have all of these to make the cake. Otherwise, it's not. That's why you can't say there's healthy narcissism, or there's some people are borderline narcissistic, because, again, that would be something different. If I were to take the baking soda and baking powder out of the ingredients of the cake, I wouldn't have a cake anymore. You wouldn't have a narcissist anymore. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And I think it just goes to show that, we need to stop throwing terms around that we don't necessarily understand. And you need to, if you think you're in a relationship with a narcissist and you need help navigating that relationship, maybe getting out, you need to go talk to somebody who understands these things, and not go to the old Google machine and just trying to self-diagnose what's going on, because you're gonna, everyone sees what they want to see. At least that's how I've always seen it. And so you're going to look at a list of, some website about what's a narcissist, and you're just going to see everything. But really, like you pointed out, it really may be somebody's got, 6 of the traits, but not all 9. And so you're not really dealing with a narcissist. And if you're not dealing with a true narcissist, the way that you need to handle it may be different than if you're dealing with somebody else that just has, that's just self-conceited or so egocentric they can't see past their own nose. There's all kinds of other issues out there, and it's just like bipolar. I'm really going to be an equal opportunity person today. I do not understand how many people tell me their wives are bipolar. It is astounding. It's probably like 70% of the men that I've ever spoken to. And I feel like it's just one of those things where it's what we tell ourselves, because we've heard these things forever. It's what we tell ourselves to make ourselves comfortable with the marriage being over. At least it's the story we're telling ourselves. Is the reason it's over is because my spouse is crazy. There's something wrong with my spouse. My spouse is a narcissist. My spouse is schizophrenic. My spouse is bipolar. My spouse is this. My spouse is that. But what you've been describing to our listeners has really been a very specific type of person that you dealt with. And really, as you pointed out to our listeners, it took you 2 marriages married to these people. And I think your second marriage ended a little bit more
much
violently, right? Yeah. Was it, did he become abusive? I think I may have heard that.
He did. And so, but real quickly, I wanted to touch on one other thing you said.
Yeah.
My first husband, Josh, as a child, he was diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder. And as, there's so many people like, well, how is a narcissist created? How does this person become whatever, and there's lots of theories. I'm not even going to go there. I'm not a therapist, but I will say some of these, childhood personality disorders like oppositional defiant do morph into other cluster B personalities, which narcissism is one of those cluster B personalities. And narcissism, there are different types of narcissists as well. And so my first husband was a covert narcissist, which means that they are the ones that are the public figures. In public, they are wonderful. They're involved in the community. They're involved in the church. On the outside, they portray this personality, and then they come home and they portray a different personality. My first husband, he was the one who was signing up to take old ladies grocery shopping, to do all this stuff. How could he be a narcissist and be abusive, Stephany? He volunteers at church. Well, that's exactly what a narcissist does, a covert narcissist. And my second one, he was an overt narcissist, self-proclaimed asshole. He hated everyone and everyone hated him. And what was interesting, both my ex-husbands referred to each other as narcissists.
That's very interesting right there. No, I think that's a great explanation, like how different someone who's a narcissist can be. And I really think you telling the story about what you went through, I mean, people really just learn by listening to examples, because otherwise it's basically reading out of a psychology textbook, right? I mean, you can't get anywhere with that. But what I think is great is you went through this, you became self-aware that you were somehow attracting this type of person into your life. And now that you're self-aware, can pretty much guarantee you're not going to be attracting another one into your life.
No.
You know what to look for. But isn't that really the key? Once your marriage has ended, or relationship, let's say you're not even married, you really shouldn't go into a new relationship until you take stock of what happened in this relationship. Was it,
Yes.
what did I do? What did they do? did I attract someone that was toxic for me? I mean, if you don't pinpoint what went wrong, you're going to make the same mistakes again. This is why the second marriages end at a much higher clip than first marriages. It's the exact reason.
Yes.
Because people get divorced, then they go marry the same person again. And it's crazy, but it happens all the time, like all the time. And so, I just feel like this story really should resonate with a lot of people, and people that are going through divorce. Maybe you're not divorcing someone who's a narcissist, but really you're getting divorced for a reason. Something went wrong in the relationship. You need to figure out what it was, and you need to do it in as objective way as possible, which means usually I think it means going to therapy and to really talking through and figuring out what actually was going on, because it's easy to blame someone like your first husband. He cheated on me. It would have been easy. Most people would have just stopped there. He cheated on me. That's why the marriage ended. When it was much more complex than that. There was much more going on. And because you didn't identify it then, you went into a second marriage with, a different kind of narcissist, but another narcissist. And that one ended, much worse than the first one. Although the first one ended bad too. Stephany, I think that I love your perspective. And I think that a lot of people really could benefit from, talking to you one-on-one and working with you. If somebody listening to this, it's like, oh, I really want to talk to Stephany a little bit about my journey and my story. Is that something that you do? And if so, how would they contact you? Can you give us a little bit of information about how people might be able to work with you?
Yeah. So, I've kind of put everything on hold with working with me directly at this time, just because, my first, with his suicide, I really have to hold space for my kids right now as they are processing all of this. But I am writing a series of books right now, and I am creating a course, and that should be done pretty soon. But if anyone wants to email me, feel free. You can email me at stephanyannSpeaks@gmail.com and just get on my list. And as soon as these things come out, they will be very helpful, because, like you were saying, it's when you don't know what happened to you. And actually, that's my first book is Awakening. My second book is what the F just happened? Because we're human. We want to know, like, what the F just happened to me? Especially when you're truly in these psychologically and emotionally abusive relationships. It's like, it's a, wah. And so I am working on some good things right now. And it is my hope to continue to bring awareness and that people don't have to go through this twice, because I will tell you, it gets worse. It gets worse the longer you stay, and it gets worse. And this is my experience, but it's also from talking to many, many people. The second ones are always worse, because I truly believe it's, the universe saying, wake up. They're going to get worse and worse until you freaking learn those lessons.
Yeah. And if you don't grow personally over the course of your life too, and actually look at yourself in the mirror and work on yourself, you're never gonna be able to attract the right person. That's a whole nother show. Because people do not work on themselves at all. What's that phrase? They bat the balls in front of their face every day, and they don't actually think into the future and think of ways to improve themselves. That's why I encourage all of the guys I coach, find these good. There's a lot of great podcasts out there about about personal growth. Just listen to them. You might pick something up that will resonate with you. Well, Stephany, it was so great to have you. I actually had a million other questions, but unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. But thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me on your show. It was really an honor to be here. Thank you.
It was our pleasure.